Hello and welcome back to the What Do We Know podcast. My name is Zach with my brother JP. We haven't done a recording in a little while. It's been a few
Yeah.
months, but life has been pretty busy, as we'll talk about. Um, and yeah, you know, I'm not too worried about it. Actually, I was really glad that you reached out saying, asking if I wanted to do one because I had been thinking the same kind of thing. And
Oh, good.
yeah, I'm kind of hoping that maybe just as life goes on, it doesn't have to be the kind of thing where every week we have to produce some kind of podcast thing, but
Yeah.
kind of having this, I don't know, like grounding um, thing that we do together that we can always come back to is kind of nice.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. It's a nice little check in. And I mean, especially now between the stuff that has happened between, when we last got together on a podcast and today.
Yeah, so let's
So,
just let's get right into that because that's sort of the genesis of this. So, of course, the big news is that my wife had a baby, so we welcomed baby Carson. He's almost a month old now, but I actually want to flip it over to you because you had brought this idea up. Maybe we could do a podcast about this stuff, and we have a few different topics all relating to this. So, was this just something you thought would be kind of a cool conversation piece, or where did the idea come from?
yeah. So like, I'm at, for one thing, like I'm really interested to get your perspective in this whole experience and some of those questions I jotted down that we could, kind of work through and see, uh, what it's like from your shoes. And then the other piece is just to kind of like make like a not like a record necessarily, but like a snapshot, like a point in time, like to capture, uh, like your perspective and like your like how you would describe your experience having just gone through, becoming a dad. And I thought that'd be kind of neat to also maybe like kind of bring both like the past and the future into the conversation and sort of just get all that articulated. And that could be neat to then one day, or maybe several times over the next decades or whatever, return to it and just kind of like a way to just put like a moment, like a marker, like a moment in time, and something you
Yeah,
could go back to.
yeah, I think it's a great idea. It's one of the things that I have enjoyed about the past recordings that we've done, and I've gone and looked at them here and there, different times just to kind of reflect on stuff, and I think it's great. I think it's the kind of thing where like if you don't have that, it's you can be leave yourself sort of wishing and wanting, like, oh man, I wish I, exactly like you're saying, like had this snapshot in time, and you sort of get that through photographs or something, or like when I did all the VHS recording stuff from our home videos. That's like, it's so valuable. It's like it's literally like a priceless thing. Like you can't ever reproduce those moments.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I think it's super cool. And we did. So my wife and I sat down before he was born, and we said, okay, we're each going to write him a letter.
Oh,
Like
cool.
here's the thing
Yeah.
we're going to do, and not really with any stipulations about here's what it needs to be or shouldn't be, and just write a letter. And so mine probably, I started spinning off in some different directions, and I spent some time on it, and typed up 2 or 3 pages worth of stuff. But it's the same kind of thing. Like here, I'll never be able to recapture this. Once the baby is born, I'll never again be able to recapture my thought process and my get my sort of pen to paper, so to speak, about what I'm thinking and feeling right now. So I mean, we did it for the baby, to like essentially give to him one day, but it's
Sure.
also kind of like, in some way it's for yourself too. Like to be able to reflect and reminisce upon that in the future.
Right. Right.
So same kind of thing with this, and I love that stuff. I sometimes have to force myself to do those kind of things. Like I've gone through periods in my life where, okay, I'm gonna try to. Literally went, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 months where I wrote like a journal entry every day, and I was doing it electronically, but I still have that stuff, stored away in the cloud somewhere, and maybe I'll read it again someday. It's kind of cool to do, but it's just like anything else. If you put too many sort of restrictions on it, or I'm going to do this every day, or this is I'm going to be really disciplined and make sure to do this, it becomes a chore. It becomes like a job, like anything else. Everything in this world sort of falls into that pattern, and so like many other things, I eventually sort of burned out on it. But I think it's really valuable to be able to check in, over some kind of consistent basis every now and then if for nothing else, to be able to reflect upon it in the future is a very worthwhile pursuit, in my estimation.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I like reflecting. Kind of like brings the things together and gives me perspective and creates meaning.
Yeah. So I'll let you kind of drive the. I know you wrote down a bunch of points here, and I'll just kind of toss it over to you in terms of how you want to go through these.
Cool. Yeah, and feel free, to delve in as much as you want or as little as you want. I mean, some of these, just stuff that has kind of occurred to me and piqued my curiosity, but whatever you want to expound on or not. And so, like, the general topic, of course, is becoming a dad, and like the whole process. And there's a lot that led up to it. And maybe the first question would be, have you known that you always wanted kids, or like when, if not, like when did that realization become apparent?
I would say for a very long time, I was pretty adamant that I did not want kids.
Oh.
And it was a gradual thing that changed my mind. In some ways, I think if you ask my wife this question, she might say that I was dragged kicking and screaming into having kids. Sort of tongue in cheek, but ultimately, the position I'm in now, it's like, yes, I definitely did want to have kids. One of the, I don't know if we've discussed this or not, but one of the things that ultimately drove me towards it was trying to imagine myself at the end of my life, sort of, on your deathbed or whatever, and reflecting back upon, a life's worth of experiences. And I thought that I thought that I would probably regret if I had not gone through the process of having children. And so that was one of the things that I sort of clung to amidst all of the chaos that is trying to decide if you want to have children. It's obviously a very big decision, not one to take lightly. And, I feel like I'm sort of pragmatic and maybe a realist, or I at least aspire to be. And so, I understood what it is going to mean honestly to have a child, both from a financial point of view, from time management point of view. I'm going to lose a lot of my sort of quote unquote freedom of how I choose to spend my time, my free time, because so much of it will get taken up by the child. And I was pretty reluctant to do that. I think that's what for many years, I think that's probably was the driving force behind me saying, well, I just don't want to do it. I'm not gonna do it. Too expensive, takes too much time, too much work. I'm too selfish, honestly, I think is what it was. Not wanting to do that. So, and by the way, now that I've had a child, I don't really feel any differently about all that stuff. Like, I understand what it means to have a kid in some sense. And yes, it's a huge imposition on your time. It costs a lot of money. You have to go into it with your eyes wide open. I'll give you one other little anecdote, which is back when I was, I'm going to say 24 or 5. So I spent 6 years working at a summer camp in upstate New York, and which is maybe a whole different topic to discuss. But I remember very specifically one day working there, and I was, we're doing like a little carnival event where you're like, the kids walk around and play little games and do things. And I was a counselor in a girls' cabin, so it was like 12-year-old girls or something I was paired with, walking around, whatever. And they stopped at this one little station, and it was like, write a letter home. It's like the first or second day of the camp, and it was like, write a letter home to your parents or whoever, and they had some markers and stuff, and so they drew a little picture on it, and wrote a few words or whatever, just only 5 minutes worth of time. And I was looking at it going, man, how great would it be to receive that? That would be so cool to be on the other side of that, to have this like person that you brought into the world, care about you. And so that's the first time that I can ever remember being like having some feeling of like, maybe I could do that. Maybe that's something that I want to do. And then I probably went to the bar and had a bunch of beers and then, forgot about it for 10 years. So yeah, it was a huge decision, obviously influenced by my wife. We had talked about this a lot of times and, made sure we were both on board with it. But it wasn't easy. It's not a decision to take lightly. And another thing that I would say about my experience is I really dislike in general people who have gone through something or who have some specific experience telling somebody else who is about to experience that thing about how they're going to think and feel when they do that experience. Like, oh, well, and I had this countless times, honestly, over the course of the pregnancy and the birth. Well, just wait until you go to that first appointment. Wait till you hear the heartbeat for the first time. Wait till you feel the baby kick for the first time. Wait till you see the baby for the first time. You're not gonna. You can't understand. It's gonna overwhelmingly emotional. It's gonna just feel so magical. And everyone's experience is different. I didn't feel any of that. I was terrified the entire time.
Oh man!
I thought it was the first time I felt him kick. Like I wanted to run outside and like run away. Like it's terrifying.
What was terrifying about it? Like the responsibility, or
definitely, there's definitely some of that
going wrong, or
all of the above, right? Definitely the sort of looming lifetime responsibility that sort of becomes more real as you actually feel the baby kick. Also, like from a biological point of view, that there's a being inside of my wife's belly. It's very strange. It's a very strange experience. Same thing with like, you go to you like hear the fetal heartbeat. They like put the little speaker on or whatever, and you hear the heartbeat, and it's like, I can see how it's certainly a very emotional time for a lot of people. I just felt terrified by it. All of these things just made it more and more real. This like slowly getting through this 9 month experience where this person manifests himself at the end of it, and it's now real, and now he's here, and now you have to take care of him, and it's your responsibility, and you better make sure you have enough money, and make sure that the house is warm enough, and that you have enough food, and like it's a very real thing. And I found the entire thing terrifying. But like the kind of terror where that like is worthy of facing, and that is going to be worth it type of thing. But yeah, I was not. I did not particularly enjoy the steps along the way. To get there, to be perfectly honest.
So what was it like when you said you were imagining being at the end of your life and maybe having regrets if you didn't go through the process of having children and raising them and all that? What was it about that potential scenario that like what regrets did you think you would have? Like, what was the motivation behind that experience leading to the decision to want to have kids?
I mean, I don't know. It's one of the biggest things you can do in your life, I think, is decide to embark upon that experience. And I don't know if I have a specific answer for you other than witnessing sort of other relationships. You know, as an example, you know, when our grandfather Oppo passed, and we were watching Mom's dog so she could be down there in Atlanta for an extended period of time, and you know, talking to her about that experience and how glad she was to sort of be there for him, and imagining, you know, sort of being on the other end of that, being in that bed, sort of, you know, your body is dying, and imagining the sort of support structure, you know, that you have around you, that your daughter was able to be there. You know, maybe in my case, my son could be there. Who knows? I think a lot of it is familial oriented, sort of, you know, various. I think over the course of my life, something that I've struggled with is sort of relationships with family. Another big positive about doing this with you is, you know, it really helps that experience, helps those relationships, and just having more family. I don't know. I mean, everyone, like, everybody knows the cliched answer, right? Like, family is the most important thing, and I feel like for a lot of my life, I just never felt that really. You know?
Yeah, I can relate.
It was sort of one of those things where you kind of know, okay, yeah, like, I don't know, the Earth is round or gravity exists, but like it doesn't really mean anything. You know, it's like it's really hard to relate to.
Yeah.
So I think and as I get older, that I do feel that changing, and maybe that's where the sort of, you know, the older you get, the wiser you get type of thing. I don't know. Maybe there's something to that. But yeah, I don't know that I have a good answer for you. I don't know that there's a moment that I can point to, or something specific that I can say, oh yeah, well, this is what I would regret, or this is where that came from. Just more of a slow build up over time, and just imagining that I could have gone through this, but I didn't. And it's more of it's almost like a guilt thing, which is another area that I've struggled with my life. Like, I could have done X, Y, or Z, but I didn't. And the reason that I didn't is like out of being selfish, you know, almost like not say like living up to your potential, but like, you know, you could have had an impact, or you could have made a change, or you could have had a positive effect in some way for someone, but you chose not to for no other reason than it's because it was an imposition on your time. Like, doesn't feel like a good reason. Might it feels good in the moment, I mean, for sure, but like looking back, those are the kinds of things that I think I would regret, because I have you know, micro examples of that now. Over the course of my life, various ways, like things that I did or didn't do for reasons that ultimately come down to it's too much of an imposition on me. So that's where I thought the resistance, I guess, was mainly lying in me not wanting to have kids. Is like I hate when my sleep gets interrupted, or which I really do. You know, I really hate that. Or I hate when I, you know, want to just relax and, you know, watch a movie or something, but then I can't do that.
So have you felt any shift in your perspective, like maybe like as dramatic as like holding your son in your hands for the first time, but like certainly like now it's been almost a month, and like from like that more like self-oriented perspective to like an outside oriented, like external, like, you know, like your son or like your family now, you like, you know, because you have multiple dependents and like that responsibility.
I definitely feel the responsibility. to varying degrees. But and then there's the other side of that too, which is like there's still a part of me that like there's I mean this might sound terrible, but there's like a small part of me that is like just kind of like I have to do like
I'm sure.
I have this responsibility, but it's almost like I don't want to feel it, but I know that I have to feel it. I don't know. It's very strange. But I mean, the answer to your question, yes, absolutely. Absolutely, I feel much more responsible. I feel a lot of obligation. And when I've been trying to soothe him for an hour and he's still crying, I get frustrated,
Sure.
I get really frustrated. And I am, that's one of the things I'm going to have to figure out is like, how do I grow my patience and deal with the expanding needs of a newborn into a toddler aged child and beyond. But yeah, it's that's one of the things I would say, even as we went through the pregnancy, that I started feeling more of a sense of almost urgency in a way. Like I need to make sure my ducks are in a row. I need to make sure all my financial assets are, in line, that I have my beneficiary set up, that our life insurance is up to date, all the different things.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel all that. And actually, interestingly, so our eldest dog, Decker, who's 3, he's like a husky German Shepherd mix. He pretty much, some people say like, oh, the dogs change during the pregnancy, like they know there's a person in there. We didn't experience any of that with him really, but once the baby came, he's gotten quite a bit more protective. He's just always on patrol around the house. He's if a delivery driver comes up the driveway, I mean, he freaks out. He's barking. He wants to rip people's heads off. He's very protective of the baby. It's just kind of interesting to see.
Oh, good. You have like a guard dog.
Yeah, it is good. So
yeah. So I guess another question: do you feel like any sense of connection, or has there been a change in like your sense of your relationship to like dad or mom and dad or like our ancestors, like that sort of like feeling of like continuity, and like now like the torch is being passed to you to raise the next generation, and like any sort of like sense of perspective there? Or?
I don't know that I have really thought about that angle of it. I have in the past month often thought about, what our dad was thinking and feeling as he went through these moments with you, say, for the first time.
Sure.
Because I mean, it's definitely there's definitely a lot of change. I don't know that I feel some like deep connection to our ancestors necessarily. So I can't really speak to that so much as just understanding that what it is to be a parent, and trying to reflect and recognize that our parents went through this. And that sometimes does help with my patience, like especially we were over at Mom's house today with the baby, and she was talking about how I guess I had ear infection problems when I was a kid, and I couldn't sleep, and she had to like stay up and rock me all night and like sleep upright and all this stuff. And honestly, I look at that and I'm like, man, I can't even hold him for 40 minutes with him freaking out, and then I just get frustrated and like have to call in my wife or something. So I guess in some ways it gives me a new respect for what sort of those before us have gone through.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's difficult. It's I don't know. It's a very strange thing becoming a parent.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, my experience has been a little bit different in the sense that I kind of jumped into it with kids that were already there, and the
Yeah.
youngest at the time was 4, almost 5. But one thing that kind of, I didn't know what to expect, but that I felt was, like now I was suddenly in this role of being a parent, and you know, kind of to see the other side of it, like because up until that point I'd always just like there's like mom and dad and like the parents, and then to like suddenly be in the role of a parent, um seeing the other side of it was just, I guess it kind of like humanized mom and dad more,
Mm.
like I was like, they're just people like that raised me, but um yeah, I don't know. It just being on the other side of it, I don't even think I'm articulating it very clearly, but I felt like I guess I felt closer to dad in a
Mm.
sense. Yeah.
Going
For,
through like almost a mutually shared experience in a way.
yeah. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, kind of getting more, I guess that's what it is, like getting more insight into what it's like to be in that role.
Yeah. I mean, I can relate to that for sure. And I've gone through plenty of times where I imagine, going through various milestones as the kid grows up and like imagining dad in those milestones, like what he would think or feel. Um, and, you know, hoping that I can be, a good father in those times. Um, that's another thing that really has terrified me, kind of to one of the earlier topics we were discussing, is not really thinking that I would or could be a good father and being
Oh,
afraid of, I guess, sort of failing in that regard. Um, and it's I think it's a reflection again on sort of who I am as a person, and like you're not going to jump off a bridge when you're bungee jumping if you're not sure the bungee cord is attached, right? Like that's kind of how
yeah,
I look at things. Like I don't feel equipped to do this, so I'm not going to do it. Like that's the only logical decision, right?
sure. Yeah.
But then the problem is it's not that objective. Like how do you know whether or not you're equipped? And then they say, oh, there's never the right time to have a kid, or you're never ready to have a kid, or any of these other things that I don't. Maybe that's true. I don't know, but um, I guess that's where my brain wants to go. Is I'm not going to do the thing unless I know that I'm going to have like a good outcome and feel prepared to encounter it. But
Yeah.
having kids is kind of works outside of that paradigm in some ways.
So what are some like I'm not this still, you know, I'm sure beyond where you're at right now with dealing with a newborn, but what are some like values or like lessons, like uh, points of wisdom that you hope to pass along to your son?
Yeah, that's a little bit. I tried to think about that a little bit in that letter that I wrote him. Of like, here's uh, trying to come up with some sort of fatherly wisdom, I suppose. Um, I think one of the biggest takeaways, and I'll go to the sort of software world, which is this is what I typically an answer that I typically give to uh, like younger engineers or developers is like it's okay to sort of try something and fail and not come up with the right answer and not be able to figure it out, but it's not okay to not try.
Yeah.
And so that's what I tell people, and I try to embody that myself, at least in a professional capacity, at work. Is I might not, I'm not the world's best programmer. I might jump into something and fail sometimes spectacularly, and not come up with a good answer at all. But the way that I learn best is by jumping into that water, jumping in where it's too deep without a life vest and trying to come out the other side, right? and maybe I do, and maybe I don't, and maybe I have to ask for help, and somebody I can't figure it out, or I'm in this metaphor sort of drowning, like I need somebody. But it's you don't, I suppose you don't grow or learn anything if you sort of never jump into the pool.
Yeah.
The metaphor sort of starts to break apart. Like, you don't want to throw a baby in the deep end necessarily and just say figure it out, right? But like that, the sort of idea of you got to get it. Like, life ends up rewarding you if you just try, even if you come up with the wrong answer. Like, I think one of the things I wrote in the letter is that, at least in my experience, paradoxically, by attempting something and going the wrong way with it, or coming up with the wrong answer or something, paradoxically, you end up closer to the result you were looking for than if you had never started, right? Like, which I guess to use like a distance metaphor, like if you literally travel the wrong way towards the destination you're going to, you're further away than if you had never gone anywhere. But that's not, in my experience, how life actually works. Because the act of you going in a direction, even if it's the wrong direction, provides useful, tangible experiences and life lessons and any number of positive sort of benefits than had you just sat on the sidelines the whole time.
Right.
And that I have found that to be broadly applicable in a number of different areas, certainly professionally, with software engineering, but with other things too, like even relatively mundane things like should we try to do a podcast with my brother? Like, oh, what if I fail? What if it sucks? Like, what if I don't want to do it anymore? But like, even if all of those things happen, you've still sort of tried, right? You've gained that experience. And so that all of that rolls together into a greater level of understanding and experience and everything else in your life. And so, and it's as much a lesson for me as it is for I hope to be for my son, because what I feel like is my default state, a sort of character flaw, is that I don't want to try.
Yeah.
I want to overanalyze, or I want to just throw my hands up and say, well, it's probably going to fail anyway, and so I'm not even going to do it. So I would say that's one, and then 1A that I also put in the letter that's related to that is I have another sort of character flaw, which I would say is I have a high propensity to quit. And I think that is true across a lot of parts of my life. Honestly, going back to being a kid and like literally wanting to quit sports teams is one of the earliest examples I can think of for myself. And I can remember actually, Dad saying, "You've signed up to do this. You're going to do it, right?"
Yeah.
And which I think is valuable. And so, but there's two sides to it, to me, though, is it is valuable to see things through to completion, for sure. But at the same time, it ends up, again, sort of paradoxically, being a benefit to wanting to quit all the time in some cases, right? Because life is never so black and white. And so one of the things I think I put in the letter is that I somewhat rarely get pushed around by people, like in sales situations or certainly professional situations, disagreements at work or friendships that are going toxic or whatever. Because ultimately I know in the back of my head that I just go, I can walk away. I just quit. I quit this job. I quit this friendship. I quit this relationship. I quit sitting here listening to this, timeshare salesman trying to sell me this, which I actually really enjoy going to timeshare presentations, maybe a different topic, but being able to have that high propensity to quit ends up strangely serving me in some way. So it's both. Like you both you want to see things through, but then there's also trying to find value and trying to use your, what maybe your flaws, your natural flaws are, trying to use them to your advantage. And the first step in that, for sure, is recognizing what they are. And if you know what your sort of weaknesses are, then you can flip them around and find situations to apply them in a positive way. And I try to do that. I don't know that I'm always successful, but those are some of the things that I'm thinking about. I'll probably not tell my young child that he should quit things.
Yeah.
But
sure he'll want to do that on his own.
Sure. But I do think broadly the willingness to try, sort of appetite for trying new things is very helpful, and I would hope to impart that to my children.
Yeah, it's kind of ironic that that's one of your values you're articulating, because right before we launched into that topic, you were talking about how you're afraid of being a parent because you didn't know if you would be good at it. And so if you didn't value trying, even if you weren't certain of the outcome, then you likely wouldn't be a parent right now.
Yeah, that's a good point. I would say one of the themes of my adult life anyway, and where I draw a line between sort of adult and formidable years growing up as a child, is trying to increase that willingness to try new things. And even again at sort of dumb things like food, right? We grew up in a house where Dad liked the things that he likes, and he doesn't like the things that he doesn't like, and he's not going to eat them, and he's not going to try them because he doesn't like them. And I feel like, at least for me, I definitely, kind of entered into adulthood with the same idea, especially around food. I don't like it, I don't want it, I'm not going to try it. That's it, right? And so that was one of the first areas as a young adult, trying to peel those layers back and be maybe I will at least try it, and maybe I still don't like it, but entering into that realm of the unknown in some way and recognizing that, I have a choice. Maybe that's how I was raised, but I can make my own decisions, and there's value. I think there's value in trying new things. So, yeah.
When did you feel like you started to do that?
Oh, well, I mean, I guess college is the answer. The college age years, you're sort of on your own more, and it just over time. And then as I sort of grew out of that and got into, I mean, I can think of just random weird sort of social situations where almost like peer pressure, where you're I'm in a situation where I need to eat tomatoes so I don't offend this person or parent or I don't know, but I don't like tomatoes, and I've never even eaten a tomato. And then, but so I sort of do it out of almost social obligation and be maybe it wasn't that bad, situations like that are, micro examples, but I think broadly, early 20s, I really sort of got on that way. And another great example is salads. I think Dad did like salads, but I never ate salads. Even as a kid, as a young adult even, I didn't like salads, not eating salads. And I remember...
You eat salads now?
Now I eat salads all the time. I eat 5 salads a week. I do a meal prep I typically do meal preps before the work week, and I do salads for lunch every day.
Huh.
And I eat a ton of salad. I remember going to Sakura with Dad, and one of the Japanese hibachi place. One of the things that they do, and I think a lot of hibachi places do, is the sort of starting on appetizers. They give you a salad and they give you a little bowl of miso soup a lot of times.
Yep.
And I remember being with Dad, or for years, we would go there, and salad comes, I push it away. Soup comes, I push it away. I don't like that either. Same thing with soup, right? And I have a very vivid memory of at some point in there, like I was really hungry, and these appetizers come, and like I didn't want them, and I remember Dad leaning over to me and like, we could have been at Burger King right now, we could have been eating chicken fingers and fries or something, because I don't think he wanted to go there too, whatever it was, but yeah, it's weird memories that you have, weird things that show up. But yeah, so now I eat a ton of salad, and I still don't like a lot of soups, but I'll at least try them, right? And I do like some. I typically like creamier and thicker, like more heartier, like soups as opposed to very brothy ones. But it's okay to actually have legitimate preferences, but to have never tried things and say you didn't like them,
you're gonna end up missing out.
Yeah, so. Absolutely.
So this kind of dovetails into another question I had, which is, what are some things that you remember mom and dad doing, like as we grew up, like in raising us? What are some things that they did that like you hope to emulate, and what are some things that like you definitely hope to do differently?
One thing that is coming to mind for sort of emulating is I have always held this image of our father, of this incredibly kind, sort of selfless in a lot of ways, person towards other people, overly polite in many instances, sort of person that you'd carried his tools around and would help a broken down person on the side of the road type of thing, and honestly, I think those views were confirmed, if anything, by watching all those VHS tapes and seeing it's so incredibly interesting to see those little moments that are like not even part of the event that he's taping, but like his interactions on the side with like other parents, or like, there's one that's coming to mind is when it was the first day of school for us when we're kids, something, and there's just a 15-second exchange between him and the neighbor that occurs off camera, but you can hear, and just the way that he talks to other adults and how polite and kind he is, incredibly powerful, I think. I still remember, we go for, I think we've probably talked about this, but, if I went for a sleepover somewhere, he'd say, remember to say, yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, please, thank you. It drilled into my head to the point where I still, if I'm, receiving service from somebody at a restaurant or a cashier somewhere, like, I still use formalities most of the time. So I would hope to emulate some of that, to emulate sort of what it means to be, I guess, a good citizen, be kind to other people, help your neighbors type of thing, which is very much what I think are the best of what our dad was. So I guess I don't know if that's more of a trait about parenting or about him as a person, but either way. And then, so I guess other positive things that I want to try to emulate are, at least for most of, when our dad died, I was blindsided completely as a 16-year-old kid. I had no idea I know it was a little bit different for you, but I had no idea there was any kind of issue or anything. I think is probably a good thing. Like, a 16-year-old kid probably should not be burdened with understanding, marital issues and whatever else is going on in our dad's head. So up until that time, I mean, I thought we had a really support, and we did have a really supportive family, an intact family structure, family unit. Um, and not the kind of thing you ever had to worry about as a kid. I think there's a lot of kind of benefits, I guess sort of unforeseen benefits, or kind of reaching for the word, but kind of like things that are very beneficial to raising a child. It got some intangibles, right? Of like
Yeah.
having a family with two parents at home, having a pretty grounded family structure. We didn't move around. Like, we really only moved the one time from the lake to the house, and like, here's our house. Like, this is where we live. Like, we're not moving all the time. I think that's a benefit. Those are all those things. Just the sort of environment that our parents created for us to grow up, I think is, I don't know how you ask for a better one, really. It's exactly what you want. Especially seeing the VHS tapes of the home videos. There's presents around the tree at Christmas. There's we're having kids' birthdays and going to pizza places and taking little vacations as a family. And it's like, all of those things are great, I think, and I want to do all of those. Actually, that just made me think of a weird thing. I don't know if you recall any of this, but I recall one of our dad's friends who was having financial issues at some point, and I don't know why I remember this, but I was there for this, and I remember a conversation, I think between mom and dad, where they were talking about, let's make sure they have presents to give their kids for Christmas. Like,
that does kind of sound familiar.
Again, I don't really know much more context other than that, but like that kind of charitable side of things, of looking out for others, and I hope to be able to impart that kind of stuff. Again, which is a challenge, because I don't necessarily feel that way all the time, Sure. But yeah, those are all things I want to emulate. Supportive household, family structure, wanting the best for your kids. And I mean, I think I never enjoyed our education experience going through it, but looking back, I think it was really good.
Yeah.
So, and just giving opportunities for my kids. There's always, I know we've talked about this, but Dad would always say, you either work hard now or you work hard later, right? And try to instill this idea of opening up any door for your kid that they want to go. It's sort of, they have to walk through it, right? Like, I don't want to be the helicopter parent. I don't want to give my kid everything, but I want to give them the opportunity. I think Warren Buffett has a quote where he says, I'll give them enough money to do anything, but not enough to do nothing.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So, yeah, I think those are all good things.
Do you remember, I remember it a lot, so I'm pretty sure Dad said it like more than once. Like, it was kind of one of his like little mini lectures or speeches to us, but about, he didn't care if like we grew up and like if we made a lot of money or not or whatever. For all he cared, we could grow up and work on a trash truck or like clean toilets or whatever, like didn't have to be like some high status job. But the one thing that was important to him is that we were happy. Like, he wanted us to be happy.
I do remember something about that. I would be lying if I said that it is a strong memory, but yeah. In some way, yeah. I mean, I think that is in line with who he was as a person, of sort of, you can be whoever you want to be, type of thing, and giving you the space to do that. Yeah, actually it's interesting to think and talk about that because ultimately that was one of the sort of things that kind of became his downfall, is losing that success or the illusion of success, with so much of the money in the airline stock and the airlines going bankrupt and losing pension and retirement and everything, and which is all very much intertwined with financial things. But just as I was saying, I mean, it's hard. These are as much lessons for me as anybody else. It's hard to take your own advice sometimes.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I think like his specific examples of like, being a trash man or whatever were just kind of more to like illustrate a point. Like it didn't really matter to him what exactly we were doing as long as it was something that I guess we found meaningful or, like that, we were happy in life. But yeah, I don't know, like as far as him applying that for himself, I think there's that other side of it too, which you've articulated and, being a parent and all the responsibility that goes with it. And, like you were saying, you wanted to make sure you had like your financial stuff together and like life insurance and all this stuff. And so I would imagine that for him, when stuff kind of felt like it was falling apart and he wasn't keeping on top of it, maybe the way that he demanded from himself, like that could have come into him, kind of losing hope or maybe thinking that we'd be better off without him or something like that.
Right.
But I don't know. Anyway, my intention with this conversation was to focus more on like you being a parent.
I mean, it's all intertwined, right? It's so
yeah. But so I guess, and that's kind of the other side of this question, which is like, what are some things that we were raised in, or that our parents did that you hope to not do or to do differently?
Yeah. I'd have to really think about this one. I don't know. I don't know if I have anything off the top of my head. I mean, the easy answer back then would have been, don't force me to go to this private high school type of thing. Yeah. Which, because I never enjoyed the process, but I wouldn't have enjoyed any schooling, I don't think.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And they were trying to, give us the best they could. And again, looking back, I think it was a good decision. I think we had a good education. I think I've even remarked in the past that I found high school more challenging than most of what I did in college.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a reflection on my college experience or my high school experience or both, but anyway. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Does anything come to mind for you?
Yes. So, well, I mean, for one thing, like the decision whether or not to do private education, certainly the emphasis on the importance of education and like critical thinking and being able to learn and like continual learning. And in our case, like we're not in a position where we could afford to send the kids to private school, but also like they're already entrenched, or like we couldn't easily afford it without making like pretty big sacrifices, but they're also like really entrenched and doing well in like the public schools that they're at. So It's like kind of like a non-issue, like I think there are a lot of advantages of going to private school like that we did. But I think there are lots of opportunities and resources available, at least in like, maybe like the average or like good public school districts where you don't necessarily need a private school to like still get those same benefits. So that might be one thing, is like, not necessarily needing to do private school, but still emphasizing education, I think, is important. And I mean, this other thing, I think, I guess it was kind of like the ongoing debate between mom and dad when we were growing up, because I remember mom mom telling me. I think that, yeah, because I think this was like much later, and she had said something to the effect that, dad, I don't remember the exact wording, but basically dad thought that she made our lives too easy. Like he
Mm,
thought we needed to like work harder or like be held to higher standards, maybe be more accountable, maybe. Like maybe uh like not have as much of an allowance, or like have to pay more towards like cars that we were driving or insurance, or like just like having to pull more of our own weight, maybe like doing more chores or something. I'm not really sure what exactly the specifics were that led to those conversations with them, but I know that was like something that mom has mentioned in the past, is like that was sort of a maybe like a point of contention, or like kind of like a push and pull between them.
yeah.
And then I think after dad died, there was definitely, and I don't blame mom at all, because like that was a very like extreme situation to be in and try to navigate and to help the four of us like figure out how to keep moving forward, like with this huge, loss. But I think she kind of erred on the side of coddling is probably too strong of a word, but like doing whatever she could to make our lives easier, and
Yeah.
not holding me in particular, not holding me accountable for the consequences of my decisions, like for several years, or not like sufficiently accountable. So like, I would run up a bunch of credit card debt and she would pay it off, and eventually like I ran up a bunch of credit card debt because I wasn't learning the lesson. She paid it off once or twice. And then so like she wouldn't do it, and so I had to sell my car. And so like that was kind of an eye-opening experience. Like suddenly I didn't have a car, but then she let me use the family truck, so I still had a way to get around. So it was like, and then I went and had the party at the lake, and there people ended up vandalizing some stuff, and she held my feet to the fire for that, which was certainly, I was pretty angry at the time and not fun, but was also a really valuable experience to kind of get my attention and
Yeah.
start the process of being more accountable or responsible. So I think like to wrap that up, like the emphasis on accountability and like taking responsibility for yourself and your actions. Um, yeah, just accountability in general, I think, is something that um, it took me a while fully uh, to fully get that lesson.
Yeah.
And I think part of that was because I was able to get away with not being fully accountable for a while.
I think you're completely right. I relate a lot to what you're saying. Um, and I mean, I actually have thought about this. I'm glad you brought this up. I've thought about this with raising, my kids, hopefully more than one kid. It's kind of a weird situation. Like, you want to give your child every advantage and help them, obviously, as much as you can. But there's definitely a balancing act, because if you give them too much or help them too much, it ends up having a negative effect on them.
Right.
Kind of like what
Yeah.
you're saying. And so then the question becomes like, well, how do you, like, what is the best way to actually help someone? I mean, I think we both have plenty of examples of our past of where, help that we were given ended up having negative consequences, unforeseen consequences. But I think that's pretty common. A common part of, growing up is learning to take care of yourself and recognizing that there are consequences. One of the things I remember when I lived in San Diego early after I moved out there, at some point mom came out there for work or something, and we got together for lunch or something. And we were I don't know, we were talking about something kind of related to these points. And at the time I was doing pretty well. I was kind of, a year or so into into an actual career, right? Which is something I had never had. I was almost 30
Yeah.
years old, right? I've only ever worked odd jobs or like, crappy minimum wage jobs, or didn't work at all because I had money from a college fund or something. And
Yeah.
I felt sort of entrenched in my own destiny, I suppose. And one of the things that we were talking about, and I said, I think she was asking me about, has my mindset changed or something about life or any of this, given what, I moved across the country and got a job and working and have to pay rent and all this stuff. And I think what I said, something along the lines of, which I've thought about a lot, and it's not my idea, I ran into this somewhere. If you can internalize the idea that no one is coming, that it's on you, you have to figure it out, and you're responsible, then you can end up sort of rising to the occasion. And so
Yeah.
I often think of this idea that no one's coming, it's not like I'm playing Monopoly and I'm going to draw a community chest and be given $10 million, like nobody's coming. I have to figure it out. And that has really helped me, say, in the past, whatever it's been, 7 years or so, since I've sort of really progressed in my career and excelled in some ways, and had some financial success, and we have a house now and a baby. But really trying to, and I think this is something that ultimately relates back to Dad, is really sort of, in a way, like grabbing life by the horns, like taking control of your own destiny and getting out there. And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier about, being willing to try and put yourself out there and take risks in some ways. And I didn't get that certainly from the time that Dad died until really my late 20s. Again, no fault to anybody. It's an incredibly difficult situation, that we were put in. But, in a lot of ways, it kind of, I feel like I was set back. Again, paradoxically, I was set back in progressing in life because of things I was given. Which doesn't make any sense, because if you're given things, you should be moving forward, right? But like, it actually moved me back. It doesn't make any sense, but it's true. Same thing with the college fund, right? Like is something that was something that is born out of only wanting the best for us, right? Like, here's some, and this is before the cost of college is exponentially increased, really. Like, you're going to have all this money when you graduate high school that is earmarked specifically for higher education. You're not going to have to worry about it. It's one less thing to think about. Go, blaze whatever path you need to and move forward in life. And it ended up having, I'm not joking when I say, quite literally the exact opposite effect for me. I did not care at all about my college experience. My goal when I graduated high school was, I only applied to 2 colleges, and my only criteria was I want something in-state, as cheap as possible, because at the time my understanding was that should I graduate with funds left over, I would pocket the money. Right?
Yeah.
It very literally had the exact opposite effect from what it was intended for. And I'm looking back, I'm very grateful that money was there, because it ended up being a sort of safety net in a way that got me through some, difficult points throughout my 20s. But I mean, I certainly took advantage of the money being there, and not in a good way, not in a way that was healthy for me, or that was progressing me towards being a productive member of society. So that sucks, right? I mean, it sucks that happened. Now, that's not to say that it's all bad. Like, it seems that other members of our extended family who had a similar thing have used that and done well. But at least for me, it was a complete train wreck.
Yeah, I was kind of in the same boat.
So
I
yeah,
think there's like something to be said about like learned helplessness. And so if you know, or if you think that there's somebody there, or there's some like safety net, then there's less incentive to like stop making excuses and figure it out.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But again, it's a balancing act, right? Because like you
Yeah.
don't literally want to be in poverty and you're trying to scrape dollars by just to keep the lights on.
Right.
Certainly there's a lot of people in those situations that are able to still rise up out of them. But again, like if you're in a family that is middle class or relatively well off and you're a parent in that family, like what is the best way to help your kids be successful in life? And the answer is not to just dump money on them.
Right.
But then it's like, well, how do you actually help them? Like what are my resources worth if not for furthering, the next generation of my kin? Like if I've worked hard my
Yeah.
entire life, shouldn't you be able to use those resources to help my children? And so I would say yes, absolutely, but how you distribute those resources is of utmost importance. And I don't know the answer. This is going to be
Yeah.
something that I'm really going to struggle with over the next, 20 years trying to navigate.
Yeah.
I don't want to repeat the mistakes that I feel like, that we went through. But at the same time, like, I don't want to kick my kid to the curb when they're 18 and say, good luck, like, meanwhile, I'm
Yeah.
sitting around drinking Mai Tais or something. I mean, it doesn't feel like a good situation either. So that's going to be a big area of growth and learning for me.
Yeah. I think it comes back to that Warren Buffett quote. Like you want to give them enough money to have opportunities, but not enough to where they, aren't making effort.
Yeah.
Or to paraphrase.
And to go back to the thing that Dad was saying, I don't care if you're, garbage man or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Like, but what matters again is getting out there, and you gotta go in a direction, right?
Yeah.
You can't literally just not move, which is what I did for a long time. Long
Yeah.
time. I didn't want to go anywhere.
No, it's a bad place to be in because, like, yeah, you might not have to, like, you have money, so you're not going to have to like starve. You can buy food or whatever, pay for the essentials, but you're not like doing anything. So you don't have like that sense of like purpose or the satisfaction of like of achieving goals. And then
Yeah.
like, for me, it just led to depression and like despair.
Completely agree. I can completely relate. And life again has a way of, when push comes to shove, you can figure it out. It's the greatest adaptation of human beings that separates us from any other living organism is our ability to adapt literally to anything.
Yeah.
Just another anecdote is when I was living in New York, upstate New York, I was in a living situation that was very cheap, living with basically with a friend in a very cheap apartment in a very cheap area of the country, essentially. And I was sort of taking online classes and slowly finishing this dumb degree that I didn't want to do, but I didn't know what else to do. I was at least moving in a direction, though, right? I was doing something.
Yeah.
And my friend wanted to. He wanted to buy a house. He wanted to get out of this apartment. He wanted to move to a little bit more expensive area that was only 30 minutes away, and he wanted to buy a house. And he said, you can move with me. You can live in my house. I was already splitting the rent with him in the apartment, but the rent in the house is basically going to double, right? So my rent was going to double. And I said, well, this kind of sucks, but I mean, he's leaving. What else am I going to do? So I decided to do it. I went with him. I lived in his house, but now I need money, right? Well, what do you do when you need money? Well, I went and got a job, JP. What a novel concept, right? Before, I didn't have a job. I was literally, I mean, I guess a silver lining of this is I learned how to stretch $1. I mean, real far. Because I was essentially living in poverty without having a job. But I had a little bit of money coming in every month, enough to pay $300 towards rent and a little bit towards food. And that's really all I had. And then I would work during the summers at the summer camp and sometimes on the weekends and, put a little bit of extra money together. But then, when the life circumstances came to bear on me, I did what you have to do. What humans have always done is you adapt. And
Yep.
sometimes you need that pressure to squeeze you. And I went and got a crappy job at a restaurant, bussing tables, and ended up, then waiting tables there. And I don't know, I've got a bunch of stories from that job, and it was great. But in the moment, I certainly did not want to do it. And
Sure.
it's plenty of times, when it came time for me to go to work and I didn't want to go to work, I didn't want to do it. But it gave me money, and it let me, continue to survive. So, and there were lessons to be learned from it. So once again, I think this all sort of drives back to that same theme of that you just have to go in a direction.
Yeah.
And almost what the direction is doesn't matter, but you just have to go. You have to go.
Yeah. Let's do something. Yeah. 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 This kind of is a segue to a kind of maybe tangential topic, but something I thought would be probably good to cover, for the intentions of this this podcast. And that would be so this was around the period when you first met your wife, right? Like,
yes. Yeah.
So how did that whole thing happen? Like, how did you guys meet? How did you get her interested in you, even though you were this
Bum?
poverty bum, didn't want to work and whatever else?
Yeah. Well, we met in 2013 at that same summer camp.
Okay.
I worked there for 6 years in a row, and it was my last year ended up being her first year. She did 2 years, 2013 and 2014. I stopped at 2013 for reasons we probably shouldn't get into during this podcast. That might be another conversation. But anyway, so 2013 was my last summer there. And yeah, so one of the reasons I enjoyed going to the summer camp so much was because there was always so many friends. I made lifelong friendships for sure, friends that I'm closer with than anybody else. And I mean, honestly, it was a good place to meet girls.
Sure.
And so, as a, I guess I was 26 roughly. And she came along, and, I ended up going after her, and we ended up getting together. So
how did that play out? Did you know when you first saw her that you're interested, or was it something it took a while? Did you guys initially hate each other, or
Oh, no. But it's not like it wasn't like the movies or anything where, time stops and it was love at first sight type of thing. Yeah, there were always well, I think I saw her at the beginning of camp, and I thought she was cute, and I don't think she thought anything of me other than I was just another person who was there. And she had come to the camp with a boyfriend, and the boyfriend was at camp.
Oh, my. Huh.
So, yeah. Well, I had to get in there and work some magic. What can I say?
Yeah.
But yeah, it was. No, I don't think she was interested in me at all. To begin with.
So, at what point did that change? Did this evolve over the summer of 2013, or was it more like a multi-year thing of you guys kind of keeping in touch and then slowly growing closer?
No, it was just during it evolved over the summer for sure, and by the end of the summer, we were dating. Actually, the day we started dating was the day before Ralph died.
Oh, wow.
In 2013, which was so end of July or August 1st or something, roughly around there. So yeah, it was difficult. I mean, it was a courtship period, right, where I was trying to get her interest, and then one I suppose positive character trait that I have is that once I get interested in something, not necessarily related to relationships, but like like computers or like I've been redoing my basement over this paternity leave. Like once I get my
Oh,
mind's head on something, like I'm full bore. I'm full bore ahead, and I
yeah.
have ridiculous intensity. Although sometimes short lived, but at least sort of in the moment. And so yeah, I went after. I pursued her. I was and it took a couple months or whatever. I think the summer is like 2.5 months, and after 2 months we were dating. So, which is it's a hard one, right? Because you gotta break up the current relationship, get the current boyfriend out of the picture, then I gotta get into the. It's a whole thing. Yeah.
Oh man, some strategy, I'm sure. Yeah.
Interestingly enough, I mean, being a bum certainly is not a positive, I would say,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
in the relationship game. Neither, by the way, neither is enjoying computers and video games and all the things that I'm interested in. Those are all for sure negatives.
Yeah.
Um, so you have to overcome them, right? And so, um, not that I'm Brad Pitt or anything, but I've learned to work around my limitations, right? So
You
um,
adapted.
I adapted, absolutely. I adapted, and
Yeah.
one thing actually, this is I don't know if this is a segue or not, but one trait again that I've identified in myself that I think is beneficial is especially in software engineering is I have, even though I would consider myself to be relatively more introverted of a
Hmm.
person, I can succeed in social situations. And
Yeah.
if I want to, a lot of time, like outside of like being depressed and going through weird phases and stuff like that, right? But
Sure.
I've always been able to talk to people and put a couple sentences together and have some amount of charisma, and it's immensely beneficial in software engineering because there's so many people who have absolutely zero of that. And so if
Yeah.
you have a little bit of the technical skills and some of the sort of soft skills, like I'm talking about, it's a really potent combo. And so,
Yeah.
same thing in sort of relationships is that you can use just a little bit of humor and wit and everything else, and you can make yourself attractive at least as a man who likes video games and has no money and who used to live in an RV. Uh, you can end up
Yeah.
spinning it. You can end up spinning it and coming out the other side uh, with a little bit of success. So yeah, again, humans can adapt, right? Like that's what we can do.
Yeah. Yeah. So then, because I don't remember when it was. I don't think it was like that early on when you guys started dating, but I think it was like within a couple years. I want to say that I remember you telling me that that she was the woman you wanted to marry, and this was like before you
Hmm.
guys were engaged or anything. I want to say it was in 2015 or 16, something like that.
Hmm.
But
I
I
don't
guess you
recall
don't remember that
that.
at all. Yeah. So I guess so when did you know that you wanted to like that she was the one?
Oh gosh, I don't know. Well, I'll say this is that throughout, this is true even today. Actually, is that uh, we really don't fight in the
Yeah.
sense of, I guess, just the way that I express anger or deal with those kind of emotions. Um, I'm not the kind of person to be screaming and shouting, even though I talk about this with my therapist all the time. Like, I'm always doing those things on the inside and I want to like go break something and sometimes, I mean, there have been certainly
Oh man.
instances where have done those things, but in
Yeah.
general, I don't express myself, uh, outwardly, I suppose. And I think she's the same way. In fact, we both sort of handle those situations the same, which is we get quiet and retreat, which is I think how either of us knows that the other is upset because we just get quiet and like are very reserved and retreat away, um,
Yeah.
which is good in the sense that we're not screaming at each other and fighting all the time. But it's I mean, there's certainly downsides to it as well. But anyway, so that was true throughout all our relationship, and which is why it was such I guess, a breath of fresh air of being in a relationship, serious relationship where like we just never had any problems. Like we didn't fight. Like we were relatively on the same page with a lot of different things. Um, and then the whole reason we went to San Diego was because she finished her degree and she got a job offer out there. And so she's like, okay, I'm going. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll go. I don't know. Um, San Diego, California in general is really good for someone trying to start their career in software engineering. So, I mean, it ended up making sense. But I, yeah, I don't know when she was the one. I don't know. Look, I love my wife, obviously, but I don't really prescribe to the idea that there's only one person that you could possibly marry. I think there's any number of people who sort of the set of people that would be an acceptable mate is probably pretty big.
Yeah. So, like, when did you know that she was the one that you wanted to marry?
Yeah. I think. Let's see. We got married in 2018. So, and I think we got engaged in 2017. So, yeah, I think probably somewhere, it probably is right in that range, I guess, that you're talking about, somewhere in there, 2016 or something. And we had talked about it, beforehand. I mean, really the stick up, we can talk about this a little bit, but this is a huge topic. The stick up that we ended up having was sort of trying to figure out if we were on the same page enough when it comes to religion, and if we were compatible enough in that regard. And we went through some growing pains on that, and that was really the only sort of negative that we ever had, and it's a big one. It's for sure a big one. If you're going to marry somebody, you want to make sure you have at least relatively similar values. And religion is certainly one of the biggest there is. So, and it's still a work in progress, to be perfectly honest with you.
Sure.
But yeah, so that ended up being a sort of sticking point that was big enough to the point where we sort of broke up for a while and we got back together, and it was like, I don't know, is this going to work? Like, does this make sense for either of us? And obviously we ended up getting married, but yeah, it was a big question mark, I would say. And it by far the biggest one for me is figuring out not only if we could make it work, but should we make it work, like,
yeah,
even if we both say we're okay with wherever we are, like, is this a good idea? Like, is this going to come back to bite me in 15 years or something?
Yeah.
And I, again, sort of the analytical person that I am, like, I was on the fence for a long time. Even up to the night before that I proposed to her, I was on the fence about it. Because of, I didn't want to bring a child into this world, and then 10 years down the road have things be way more complicated, and then be asking questions, and then then life is way more intertwined and much harder to deal with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that kind of brings me to my next question in that, which is like, so did you guys know before you got married that you wanted to have kids, or is that something that was like kind of up in the air, or did you discuss it even at all?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I think we've always had a fairly good, sort of lines of communication, keeping things open enough anyway. And yeah, we definitely discussed it. Absolutely. I think if you're considering marrying somebody, that is, you need to be, you need to at least have those conversations. I think there's a number of big ones related
Yeah.
to kids, religion, money for sure. There's some big things you need to hash out. Um, and to her credit, I mean, she was very upfront about it all. Like, hey, listen, here's the situation. I want to have children, basically, and if you're not on board for that, then let's stop wasting our time. And then the question then comes back to me, like, well, am I on board for that? I don't know. My indecisiveness. Um, so that's definitely another, I guess, piece of the puzzle that sort of pushed me over the edge towards saying, yes, I do want kids. I'm going to do this. Um, and I mean, I knew almost immediately when I met her that she would be an outstanding mother. And the past month has proved that. I mean, she takes the lion's share of the things that have to do with the kid, and I try my best to contribute, but I get frustrated, and I'm the kind of person that, like, I like to sleep with a fan for, like, the white noise, and I don't like things interrupting my peace, and this crying baby is just not really conducive to that. And so, yeah, it's sorry, Carson, if you're reading this or hearing this later, but, like, I get frustrated when there's a crying baby, especially when I can't make the baby stop crying.
Oh man. Yeah.
So, yeah.
So then, I guess let's like fast forward decades. What do you imagine your son will be doing in like 30 years from now? He's like, 30 years old. What do you think he's doing?
Oh man, I hope he's alive. Uh,
You think he's going to be living in a van like his dad did,
hey, if we're lucky,
scraping by, making ends meet for a bit?
man, I don't know what he's gonna do. I mean, I think there's probably some amount of pull for fathers to, like, want their sons to follow in their footsteps, sort of career wise. I think you see that a lot with. I think there's plenty of examples of, like, even grandfather Davis, like, third generation banker type of thing, or certainly in the armed forces. Like, I come from a bunch of, a long history of people who served in the Navy or something. I don't really feel that, but I do think working in tech broadly is a really good career path, especially on the engineering side of it. I if he chose to, I think, give as I sort of extrapolate out over the next, say, 15 years, I think there will be plenty of opportunity for exposure to technology. Although we're talking about when and how much, and at what point is it okay to look at a screen and stuff like that, and figuring those things out. But coming from, growing up in this household where I am very entrenched in that stuff for my career, I think there's probably a good chance that some of that rubs off. And maybe he gets interested in computers and then maybe programming or something. I mean, there's a good chance for that. A really common thing that I'm seeing, and I see this in Shelby's family, one of her nephews is, well, I mean, a lot of kids like video games, even, like, just on the phones and stuff like that. But he's gotten so interested in that world that he's also interested in, like, the programming aspect of it. Like, he wants to build games, and he's, like, what, 11 or something right now, and I, like, for Christmas, like, his dad had me, help him build a computer so he can have a computer,
Oh,
and, like,
cool.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
And what I told Shelby's brother is, like, hey, if he's interested in this stuff, I think you should nurture it as much as possible, even if he just wants to build video games and his end goal is to play games. I had those same sort of desires. I was even in college for, like, with a computer science degree with, like, a game design focus, and because I thought I wanted to
Oh,
build video games for a long time. Come to the point where, like, I don't actually want to do that. But all of those skills are directly transferable to other areas of software engineering. Like, it's just coding, right? And
yeah.
so if you're that young, interested in coding, I would want to give them the tools necessary to try to grow that passion, I guess, because it's such a great career path. Especially, I think it will only get better over the next 50 years as we see more AI and automation and stuff, and a lot of jobs going away because of that. I don't think software engineering is going away. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, so yeah, maybe he's a software engineer, but I at least at this point I don't. I'm kind of like, excuse me. I'm kind of like our dad. I don't really care.
Yeah.
I don't care if he's a software engineer. I don't care if he's a pilot. Like his grandfather was a pilot. You should be a pilot. I don't really care. Um, yeah, I mean, I guess just like dad, like I'd like him to be happy, but I also think shooting for, I have come to believe that shooting for happiness as the end result is not particularly useful. Um, it's not really a good goalpost. Um, I think you should shoot more for being fulfilled and find meaning in something. And I think happiness sort of comes as a byproduct. So, but certainly, of course, I want him to be happy. But I'd like him to be, a productive sort of citizen, like be somebody who is responsible and can take care of himself and a family, and be useful to the world, whatever that means. Yeah.
Yeah. Sounds good. Yeah. And then I guess my last question is, so I think you mentioned it. So do you have plans for additional kids?
Definitely. Definitely want to have more kids. How many, I don't know. Uh, but we don't want them to be an only child for sure. Um, and yeah, we haven't really figured out how many. I think some of it's going to come down to what nature sort of has intended. Um,
Sure.
because so Carson was an IVF baby. We went through this whole process of fertility treatments and spending all this money and doing hormone injections and just huge drawn out process, and ended up working, luckily. So if we can't get pregnant natural, I think I have a friend who had an IVF. They did IVF for their first kid. They have 3 kids now, and the other 2 just happened naturally.
Wow.
So maybe that'll happen. I don't know.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we'll probably go back to IVF. I would think, even though it is expensive and it's tiring. But that's what I joke now. Like, we had a college fund. I spent his college fund up front.
Oh
His
man.
college fund is being born. It's so expensive just to make this kid.
Yeah. So do you think you'll find yourself in a spot where you have 4 kids, like our folks did?
Oh,
Would you want to be in that spot? Like, is that like an end goal or like a destination you want to be?
4 might be a little much. I don't know.
Yeah.
For sure, at least 2. Probably
Yeah.
more like 3, maybe
Yeah.
4. Who knows? Um, yeah, we haven't really figured out what the upper limit is going to be. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think we're coming from a family of 4 kids, and mom has told me that like she was ready to have more. And dad
Oh,
was
really?
like cut. He was like, okay, I'm cutting this off. Like this is enough.
Yeah.
I think she just liked being pregnant and liked having kids and newborns, and yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a journey for sure, but it's
Yeah.
good. I mean, overall, it's very good. A lot of people say it's very hard but very rewarding. I think that's been true for me so far. Um, yeah, I just hope I can keep them alive for a while. Luckily,
That's the
again,
goal.
Shelby is such an amazing mother, so
Yeah.
I can really lean on her. But yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult.
Yeah. I'm sure. Um, Well, cool. Well, yeah. So, like I said, I think that's all the questions I had kind of, jotted down beforehand. Is there anything else that you think would be good to include in like this little snapshot in time?
The one thing I would say, and I've been telling a few people this, but like I understand there's like some mystique and sort of magic to the allure of birth, the birthing
Hmm.
process. I found it absolutely excruciating and horrifying. I wanted no part of it. And to my credit, I assumed I was going to feel this way beforehand. I
Okay.
vocalized those concerns. Uh, I was told I needed to be in the room by many people. So I said, okay, I'll suck it up and do it. It was miserable. I'm sure it was way worse for her. I very much did not enjoy it.
Oh
Um,
man.
it took, she had like a 24-hour labor process and it was
A long
horrible.
time. Yeah.
Um, so luckily we were at the hospital there in Manchester, the Elliott Hospital. Absolutely fantastic experience in terms of facility, nursing staff, doctors, all that stuff was incredible. We had a couple really amazing nurses, especially when we sort of were getting to the end where they were helping her and guide her and how to push, what to do. I can't imagine trying to go through that process, doing like a home birth or anything. And even, so when Carson was born, he came out. First of all, they come out, they look absolutely horrifying. I mean,
Oh
it
really?
looks like, I mean, and I knew all of these things. We went to a birthing class. We saw a couple videos of a birth. I know what it looks like. I absolutely hated every second of it.
Huh.
But he came out and like he wasn't breathing right away, right? And they
Oh
tried to
man.
take they tried after he was born, they tried to put him right on the mother skin to skin, which is good. They did that for a little bit. Then like we have to take him because he wasn't breathing. He's over on the
Huh.
side. There's a nurse. They're giving him oxygen, trying to breathe. They ended up having to call down the NICU nurse. The neonatal intensive care nurse came down, and they got him going, and he's breathing and had oxygen. And then I was sort of talking with the doctor after who delivered, and she's like, "Listen, everything's okay. It's fine, but this is why you give birth in a hospital, right? In a
Yeah.
hospital that has a NICU, because this kind of stuff can happen. And like if we had done a home birth with some like midwife or something, he's probably dead right now, right? Like it's just
Oh yeah.
and I mean these are the advancements over the past 100 plus years that we have made huge strides towards in the medical community, and I don't understand why anyone would not want to take advantage of sort of like modern medicine in that way. Um,
Yeah.
so I don't understand. I know that some people choose like do home births or whatever. I can't imagine anyone doing that. I think it's incredibly um, unsafe. You're taking a whole bunch of extra risk that is completely meaningless to take. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, it was just such a great experience. There was a whole team of very qualified people to take care of him. And he's right there.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, outside of that, the hospital had a great cafeteria, so I was happy to frequent the cafeteria. They had a Dunkin' Donuts built into the hospital that was open for
Oh
like
nice.
19 hours a day, so I had a lot of coffee. Um, but when he was born, like, so when he's like, she's pushing and he's coming out, right? And the doctor said, "Hey, you can." She was telling Shelby, "You can reach down and feel him, feel the top of his head. He's still inside of her, right? But he's like
Huh.
right there." So she was like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, let me do it." And they're like, they asked me, "Do I want to do it?" I was like, "Are you crazy? I can barely survive over here. I'm about to pass out." And then the same thing with like, "Oh, Dad, do you want to come trim the umbilical cord?" It's like, we're paying you to do this. I'm not doing this.
Oh man.
So, and what I said during the birthing, we did this birthing class, like all day birthing class at the hospital a couple of months beforehand. I said to the person who led that, and I said to the nurses when they delivered them, I'm a software engineer. I am so thankful for people like you in this world who this is your aptitude that you want to do this as a career, and you're choosing to be a nurse, and you're here for people like me who I have no ability in this arena at all.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's another incredible benefit to the sort of world that we live in, where you get to highly specialize in parts of society, and everybody benefits from it. There's absolutely no conceivable situation where I would feel comfortable like trying to deliver a baby in a home birth. I mean, it's just completely absurd. But you can go to the hospital and you have all these experts. So just very thankful for that, feeling a lot of gratitude towards it. I was certainly in over my head with that. I knew I was going to be that way. But we came out the other side and everybody's happy and healthy. But absolutely terrifying experience.
Yeah. So when you first held Carson, like first time, like I assume after they got him breathing, was it just terror that you felt, or did you feel anything else?
No, I mean, I was obviously I'm happy that he was born. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of what I led off part of this discussion with, was like, I don't know if this is just who I am as a person, but I don't feel a lot of these like magic moments of like once in a lifetime type of situation where how often do you get a chance to hold your, firstborn baby for the first time? That's a once in a lifetime experience. I did that. It was fine. I mean, I don't know. It was good. It's like, it's not like there were, I didn't hear violins in the corner or something and like a tear came to my, like it was, I don't know. It was fine. He's a baby. I know what a newborn looks like, sort of. It was fine. I think I was still trying to overcome all of the terror that I was experiencing. But
was there any sort of like, maybe especially like maybe the first time you looked into his eyes, like a sense of like connection, like this is like part of you, like is there like any sort of like connection or almost like a spiritual experience thing or something?
I do get that. Yeah, I get a little bit of that. And sometimes, he's, especially now, he's like really opening his eyes a lot and looking around. And in those first couple days, he didn't do a lot of that. Did a little bit of it. But yeah, you feel like this is weird. Like this thing is like sort of made of me in a way.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's definitely a connection. Obviously I love my son, but I can at the same time I can definitely see how some people become like the sort of estranged father figures, where like they're just they don't feel like a connection to their kids. Because when I look at, again, I love my son, Carson. I'm sorry if you're hearing this. Obviously, I love you. But it's very different between me and Shelby. Like, even when it comes to soothing, like he is way more comfortable with her, and I'm holding him all the time, every day. But it's just different. It's different between a father and a mother. And so, I mean, I'm trying my best, trying to figure it out how to be a father, and trying to hold him and trying not to be frustrated and, do all the things. But, I can definitely sense, at least at this point in his life where he's not quite a month old, the much deeper connection with the mother. So, but I mean, to your question, I have had those points where I sort of look in his eyes and like feel a connection. Like, this is my son, we're connected. He's like of my flesh type of thing. And it's very strange, to be honest with you. But I'm trying to navigate those waters and figure out what it means to be a father. So it's a very weird feeling.
I would imagine. Yeah. I mean, like I said, my experience has been a little bit, of a different track, but so like all this like newborn, and then the next few years of that experience would be like it'll be new to me to watch you go through it. Like I don't have any experience with that stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of poop at this point. And not like poop like you think poop. Like it's green and like liquidy and like sometimes yellow, and it's very
Oh man,
strange poop.
that sounds delightful.
Yeah, it's pretty horrible.
Yeah,
Luckily, again, like I can't overstate how good of a mother Shelby is. She's so patient and attentive, and I'm just kind of the guy who's here.
yeah,
It's different.
yeah, yeah. All right, cool. Well, I'm sure you have poop to clean up or something.
Probably, yeah,
I don't know.
I
Yeah.
probably do.
Well, thanks for doing this with me. I appreciate it. I was like genuinely curious about these questions that we worked through. So I
Yeah,
appreciate you sharing your experience.
absolutely. Hopefully, I'll have some more wisdom to impart by the time Jeff has a baby.
Oh yeah, that's coming up.
Coming soon.
Yeah.
Okay, well, this has been great. Let's do it again sometime.
Yep. Sounds good.
All right. See ya.